Let me tell you about the time I witnessed the wildest homeowners association meeting in the sleepy suburb of Willow Creek, right after that brutal hurricane ripped through back in the summer of 2018. Forget all those stereotypes you have about HOAs being just a bunch of nitpicky folks arguing over lawn heights or paint colors. This was something else entirely raw, desperate clash where people's lives hung in the balance, egos exploded, and unlikely saviors emerged from the chaos. It all started when Hurricane Elena slammed into our coastal town, flooding streets up to rooftops and turning cozy homes into soggy ruins. Power was out for weeks, roads were impassable, and folks were scrambling for basics like clean water and dry clothes. Our neighborhood, once a picture-perfect grid of ranch-style houses, looked like a war zone, with debris piled high and the stench of mildew everywhere. I was there as a regular resident, just trying to figure out how to salvage my flooded basement, but I ended up front and center at the emergency HOA meeting held in the community center's leaky gymnasium. The board president, Mr. Harlan, a retired banker with a perpetual scowl and a reputation for iron-fisted rules, called it to discuss recovery funds. We'd all chipped in dues for years, and now that pot of money was supposed to save us. But oh man, things went south fast. The room was packed with about 50 neighbors, some still in mud-caked boots, others clutching insurance papers like lifelines. Tension crackled in the air thicker than the humidity outside. It kicked off innocently enough. Mr. Harlan banged his gavel. Yeah, he actually brought one and outlined the plan. Allocate funds for communal repairs first, like fixing the main drainage system and clearing the entrance road. Priorities, people, he barked, his voice echoing off the walls. But then Mrs. Ellison, a fiery widow who'd lost her entire ground floor to the floodwaters, shot up from her seat. Priorities? My house is rotting from the inside out, and you're talking about roads? What about helping families like mine who can't even afford generators? Her face was flushed, veins popping in her neck, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. She wasn't alone. Half the room nodded vigorously, whispering about how the board had always favored the wealthier folks on the hilltop lots, where flooding was minimal. That's when the power struggles ignited. Old grudges surfaced like buried treasures in the muck. Mr. Harlan accused Mrs. Ellison of stirring up trouble, claiming she'd skipped dues payments last year, a total lie, as it turned out, but it lit the fuse. You're just trying to grab more than your share, he snarled, pointing a finger that trembled with rage. The vice president, a slick real estate agent named M.S. Vargas, jumped in to defend him, but her motives were shady. Whispers flew that she'd been eyeing the presidency for months and saw this crisis as her chance to oust Harlan. She proposed diverting funds to essential beautification to keep property values up, which sounded noble but really meant prioritizing her clients' homes. The room erupted. Shouts bounced everywhere. That's corruption. We need food, not flowers. One guy, Tom from down the block, a burly mechanic whose garage was underwater, stood up and threatened to sue the whole board if they didn't distribute aid equally. Fists clenched, voices rose to screams, and for a heartbeat, I thought punches might fly. The air felt electric, charged with that mix of fear and fury that turns neighbors into enemies overnight. Amid the bedlam, the desperation hit its peak. A young mom, Lena, cradling her toddler who developed a cough from the dampness, broke down in tears. My baby's sick, and you're fighting over power? We're all drowning here, literally. Her sobs cut through the noise like a knife, silencing the room for a split second. But Harlan doubled down, slamming his fist on the table. Order. We follow the bylaws, or nothing gets done. That's when the real bombshell dropped. Tom revealed he'd dug into the HOA records, hacked them. Some sedan found Harlan had quietly approved a loan from the fund to his own brother-in-law for emergency repairs before the storm even hit. Gasps echoed. Embezzlement, someone yelled. Harlan's face turned beet red, denying it vehemently, but the evidence was there on Tom's phone screen, passed around like contraband. MS. Vargas tried to pivot, suggesting a vote to remove Harlan on the spot, but it smelled like opportunism. The meeting teetered on anarchy. Chairs scraped back, alliances formed and shattered in whispers. Would the community implode right there, leaving everyone to fend for themselves in the ruins? Then came the unexpected heroics that flipped everything. From the back row, where he'd been quietly observing, rose Jakey, a 20-something tech whiz who'd moved in just months before, the kind of guy who kept to himself and fixed neighbors' Wi-Fi for free. No one expected much from him. He wasn't on the board, didn't have deep roots here. But Jake stood tall, his voice steady amid the storm. Enough. This isn't about blame, it's about survival. He pulled out his laptop, projecting a makeshift spreadsheet he'd whipped up overnight. It detailed a fair distribution, immediate aid for the hardest-hit homes based on damage assessments, crowdsourced volunteers for cleanup, and even partnerships with local charities he'd already contacted. "We pool resources, not fight over scraps," he said, his eyes locking on Harlan's. "And if the board won't lead, we'll form a temporary committee right now." The room held its breath. Mrs. Ellison nodded first, then Tom, and soon a wave of agreement swept through. Harlan blustered, threatening to resign and take his influence with him, but it was too late. The tide had turned. Ms. Vargas, sensing the shift, begrudgingly backed Jake's plan to save face. By the end, we'd voted in the new system, with Jake at the helm temporarily. It wasn't perfect, some grumbled about outsiders taking over, and Harlan stormed out, vowing revenge through legal channels. But for the first time since the flood, hope flickered. We left that gym not as rivals, but as a fractured family starting to mend. Looking back, that meeting exposed the ugly underbelly of community life, how disaster strips away civility and reveals who's really in it for themselves. Yet it also showed that heroes can emerge from the least likely places, turning desperation into defiance. But was Jake's takeover a true act of heroism, or just another power grab in disguise? Did the HOA's rigid rules save us in the end, or were they the root of the chaos? And what about folks like Harlando? Lifelong contributors deserve a pass, even if they bend the rules. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen an HOA implode like this? Would you side with the board or the rebels in a crisis? Hit that like button if this story got your blood pumping, and subscribe for more real-life tales that pull no punches. We've got plenty more where that came from.